The bells of Durham had barely finished their morning prayer when the dust rose on the northern horizon. To the south, England's king was far away. Edward III was carving his legend into French soil at Crécy. To the north, Scotland saw its chance. Old alliances whispered across borders. France called. Scotland answered, and King David II marched. The Hook in October 1346, Scotland invaded England with banners high and confidence burning, certain that England stood defenseless. By nightfall, the Scottish king would be hunted through hedgerows like a fugitive, his crown exchanged for chains. This is the story of the day Scotland challenged England and lost its king. A kingdom on the move, David II was only 22, but the weight of a kingdom rode on his shoulders. Son of the legendary Robert the Bruce, David carried a name that demanded glory. The French had urged him forward. Strike now, they said, while England bleeds in France. So David gathered his host, hardened nobles, border lords, veteran spearmen. Among them marched John Randolph, Earl of Moray, a calm, experienced commander, and the fierce William Douglas, whose reputation for ruthlessness was well earned. Their target was not conquest, but chaos. They crossed into northern England, burning villages, stripping monasteries, daring the English to respond. Surely, they thought, there would be no army to stop them. They were wrong. The English, who shouldn't have been their England, had no king present, but it had men who refused to. From York came William Zouche, Archbishop of York, a warrior priest in armor beneath his robes. With him rode Ralph Neville, Lord Neville of Raby, and Henry Percy, names that carry steel and authority in the north. This was no royal host. It was a desperate levy of knights, retainers, local militias, and clergy turned soldiers. Yet they moved with purpose, shadowing the Scottish advance waiting. Near Durham, at a place known as Neville's Cross, marked by an ancient stone monument, they chose to stand. The battle begins on October 17, 1346. The two armies faced one another. The Scots took the high ground, confident and aggressive. David divided his forces into 3 divisions, a traditional Scottish formation. Moray held one flank, Douglas another. David commanded the center himself. The English, fewer in number, did something unexpected. They dismounted. Knights fought on foot. Archers anchored the line. Spears dug into the earth. There was a wall. Unyielding, disciplined, patient. When the Scots advanced, the air screamed. English arrows tore into the advancing ranks. Shields splintered. Men fell before they could strike. Still, the Scots pressed forward, crashing into the English line with brutal force. For a moment, it looked like Scotland would break them. Then Moray fell, struck down amid the melee. Douglas's men were cut off, crushed against broken ground and stone walls. One Scottish division collapsed, then another. And suddenly, King David stood alone in the center, surrounded by chaos. The fall of a king David fought. Not as a symbol, but as a man desperate to survive. He was wounded twice by arrows, one tearing into his face. Blood blinded him, his guards scattered or dead. As the Scottish line disintegrated, David fled the field. He hid among hedges and brush, crawling away from the screams of dying men. But kings cannot disappear forever. An English knight found him, then another. When they pulled him from the thicket, they did not see a conqueror. They saw a captured king. David de Tavercu of Scotland, son of Robert the Bruce, was taken prisoner and brought to the Tower of London. Aftermath and intrigue, the battlefield was silent by dusk. Thousands of Scots lay dead. The invasion had failed utterly, and Scotland's king would remain a prisoner for 11 years, a bargaining chip in England's political game. Without its king, Scotland fractured. Regents argued. Nobles maneuvered. England pressed its advantage, not with armies, but with ransom and diplomacy. David's freedom would cost Scotland dearly. And yet, the cliffhanger in London's cell, wounded and humiliated, David T. waited. He had lost the battle. He had lost his army. He had lost his crown, for now. But kings who survived captivity often return changed. The question that haunted both kingdoms was not whether David would come home, but what kind of king would return to Scotland when he did. Years passed, but the shadow of Neville's cross never faded. In the Tower of London, David too healed slowly, his wounds closing, his pride harder to mend. England treated him not as a captive commoner, but as a living coin. Edward III, the value of a king without a throne. David dined at noble tables, hunted under guard, spoke politics with his captors, and learned how power truly worked. Meanwhile, Scotland bled quietly. Without its king, the realm fractured. Regents ruled in David's name, but rival nobles sharpened knives behind smiles. Border raids returned. Loyalty weakened. The Bruce legacy, once forged in fire, now flickered. England tightened the grip. The ransom demanded was crushing 100,000 marks, a sum that would drain Scotland for generations. To pay it, taxes rose, resentment spread, and the people paid for a battle fought years before. In 1357, David II finally crossed back into Scotland, not as a conquering hero, but as a king bound by debt and compromise. He was not the same man who had marched south in confidence. Neville's cross had taught him a brutal lesson. Courage alone could not save a kingdom. From then on, David ruled cautiously, sometimes coldly, even entertaining alliances with England that shocked his own nobles. Many would call him weak, others would call him realistic. But one truth remained undeniable. On that October day in 1346, Scotland did not just lose a battle. It lost its illusion, because when Scotland challenged England at Neville's Cross, it learned that even a king, son of Robert the Bruce, could fall, be captured, and return forever changed. And history would remember that day not for the clash of swords, but for the moment a crown was broken without being destroyed.